Hey guys, Bandit here. Well, we made it. It's the end of 2021. 2022 is literally tomorrow, and for the majority of you watching this, it's probably 2022 right now. Unless something happens after I stop filming this, and all of us die before we get to enter into 2022. But if that doesn't happen, then it's probably 2022 right now. Happy New Year! The end of 2021 also marks the end of Zelda's 35th anniversary, and damn it, somebody's got to celebrate it. So here on the literal last day of 2021, I'm going to take this final chance to make my official Legend of Zelda video game tier list. This is not a new concept, it's been done many times before by many other creators across YouTube, but as we say here on Masked Nintendo Bandit, frick it, we're gonna do it anyway. I haven't ever let my audience know publicly where exactly I stand with each game in the franchise, so why not do it now? One thing that you'll notice off the bat is that this tier list starts at S and only goes up from there because all Zelda games are S tier. Well, all canon Zelda games, that is. But let's use the sales numbers of the games as the order that we'll be talking about them for the list, starting from the lowest and ending with the highest. The worst selling Zelda game of all time, and the first one on this list is Four Swords Adventures, which is right here, Four Swords Adventures, which I've played but never completed. It's got a multiplayer gimmick which a surprising amount of Zelda fans really want to experience with mainline games, but it's also completely single player friendly, unlike its predecessor, which we will get to later on in this list. Four Swords Adventures, I feel, is a solid SS tier entry because it fixed some frustrations with the first game, while still being a bona fide Zelda game full of puzzles and cool stuff. Next up is the Minish Cap, which I have played, but again, have never completed. I don't know what it is with me and the handheld Zelda games. Maybe I have a problem. Anyway, the Minish Cap is a beautiful game that handles 3D concepts in a 2D Zelda game very well. The gameplay is solid, and the story is probably one of the most unique in the entire series. What with the tiny people and the light force and everything like that. This one goes in the triple S tier for being triple amazing. Next up is the original Four Swords. Now, I've tried to play Four Swords. I really have, especially when I was a kid, but I never could. Because with this game, you have to have 4 people with 4 different Game Boy consoles in order to even start the game. I never had that growing up, and by the time that the Anniversary Edition released for purchase in 2011, which did have a single player mode, I was already past all these games from my childhood and was playing Skyward Sword and stuff like that, which is a much better game, I assume. Anyway, because it literally locked me out from playing it for the majority of my life, this is going to be our first S tier entry, okay? It's a Zelda game, and that's about it. Next up, we have the Oracle games, which have their sales numbers looped together on the websites that I was looking it up on, so I'm also going to place them together, also because I haven't played both of them. I have played Seasons, I believe, and I actually have the manga. Actually, hold up. I have the manga. Give me a second. Sorry about that. I didn't lie. I do have the manga right here, which you do have to read from, you know, like a manga. So I'm decently familiar with the games, even though I haven't played either of them to completion. They're fun, and they check all the boxes for what a Zelda game should be, but definitely throw some wrenches in the system as far as what Zelda lore usually looks like how it doesn't take place in the land of Hyrule, but yet Twin Rova is behind all the events of the game, and there's the Master Sword, which is the Master Sword, but yet isn't the Master Sword at the same time, and other weird things like that. Anyway, it's kind of confusing, so this is going to be double S tier for being a great, solid Zelda experience that comes in 2 separate games. Now, on to Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. This is notoriously the most difficult Zelda game of all due to its unique choices in gameplay. It took the overworld concept of the original game and added in some side-scroller platforming action like a Mario game with a sword. And it was just kind of messy feeling, but cool final boss fight though. Anyway, S tier for the second game in the franchise. Good effort. Next up is Phantom Hourglass, and I have completed this one. As the direct sequel to The Wind Waker, I had some pretty high expectations for this game, even though it was a handheld. And unfortunately for this game, it didn't really meet any of them, but mostly the gameplay. I didn't like moving Link with the touchpad. I didn't like swinging the sword with the touchpad. I didn't like jump attacking with the touchpad. The touchpad really bothered me, okay? Like I said though, I did finish this game, and it was nice. S tier levels of nice. Next up is the one, the only, where is it? The original Legend of Zelda. The one that started it all. There are some obvious things we have to get out of the way right off the bat. As is true of any older game, especially these days, now that there are so many video games out there, of course it doesn't hold up to modern standards of gameplay. Hell, the top-down gameplay of the recent Link's Awakening release on the Switch feels night and day better than the original game here. But there is a larger, much more impactful detail to keep in mind when judging a video game's value, and that is this little word that I like to call legacy. The Legend of Zelda is a legend in entertainment as a whole across video games and movies. It invented save states. It invented adventure as we know it, pretty much. The Legend of Zelda should be placed in the maximum SSSSS tier, but because it does have some of that aged gameplay going on there, it's gonna slide down to the SSSS tier as our first game to be placed there. Next up is The Wind Waker, and just in case you were wondering, I am looping in all sales of the games that had multiple releases like The Wind Waker. It's just easier than talking about the games as if they're separate games separately for each release. Anyway, Wind Waker is, in my opinion, one of the greatest games of all time. From the moment that gripping music that sounds like rolling waves hits you when you set sail on the open sea, you know you're in for an adventure like you've never experienced before. The way the game handled different islands that you could sail to if you wanted to, or not sail to if you didn't want to, made it feel like probably a lot bigger than it was, but even so, the impact was still there and always will be. And with the HD release, it even fixed some of the few problems I had with the game, such as having to do the song thing to reset the wind every 2 seconds, or having to take a week's worth of gameplay just to find all those little Triforce pieces scattered across the sea. So honestly, quadruple S tier, no doubt about it. One of the only games I will always recommend to everybody to play, no matter your history or what you're normally into. Next up, the infamously debatable Skyward Sword. There are people who absolutely hate this game, and there are people who absolutely love this game. The people who hate this game normally focus on, you know, gameplay. And the people who love it normally focus on stuff like this. Me personally, I'm kind of down the middle. Love the story. Yeah, the gameplay has some ideas that were mixed in there that you're kind of like, oh, okay, what were you doing there, Nintendo? But ultimately, the Switch version fixed a lot of that with the handheld mode, so yeah, triple S tier. Great game, good experience, awesome music. Next up, we have once again one of the most influential Zeldas of all time, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Now, if you were to play this game without playing it before these days, you would think it's just a regular, top-down, modern adventure game with a big enough map and just enough puzzles and adventures and dungeons. But then you realize this was the third Zelda game ever made, and it originally released in 1991, just 4 years after Zelda 2. And it still looks and feels like a modern adventure 2D side-scrolling game. And then you understand that even among Zelda games, A Link to the Past is a giant. Plus, it introduced tropes and mechanics that are still used in games to this day, and that Dark World music is a real banger. SSSS tier for the timeless legend. Number next is Majora's Mask. Now, this game is really something Now, this game is really something special, in that it's probably one of, if not the darkest video game ever created. So that's cool. Besides its strange fixation on death, it has a really neat time resetting mechanic that only the bravest games dare emulate these days, and it had the advantage of building off of and improving upon its monumentally successful predecessor, which we will get to later on in the list. My only problem with the game currently is that it's a bit short. Solid triple S tier. Phenomenal game, not sure what part of it has anything to do with Zelda though. That's an original joke right there. Up next, we have Twilight Princess. How can I not find this in the... Okay, there we go. The Zelda game's so dark, so edgy, and so mature that it was rated T for teenagers and up. And damn it, I love it to death. Again, some people absolutely hate this game though, but you know, that's the cool thing about... That was a loud motorcycle. Anyway, that's the cool thing about opinions. You can have yours, I can have mine, and we can just exist together. Anyway, I loved everything about this game. The art style, the music, the gameplay, Link's design, his voice, the bosses, Ganondorf, it all came together in a beautiful, harmonic way. And seriously, I'm always down to play this game. Welcome to the tier of the giants, Twilight Princess. SSSS tier. We're getting pretty close to finishing up now. Next up is Link's Awakening, which if you combine the original, the DX, and the Switch releases, numbers at over 11 million sales. I don't know if I said that right, but you get the idea. That makes it the best-selling 2D Zelda game of all time, which it is pretty deserving of. Especially since the recent Switch release introduced the world to the chibi clay Zelda, which is something nobody knew we wanted. The game is, again, a solid Zelda title that checks all the boxes and randomly features some Mario enemies just scattered around the world, but nothing too out of the ordinary as far as gameplay is concerned. Plus, it is extremely short as opposed to all the other Zelda games, with noobs being able to complete the game in under 15 hours on average, and Zelda elites finishing the game in under 10 on average. For Link's Awakening, verily, it be the nature of the game to go into double S tier. The next game on this list is the super overrated Ocarina of Time that nobody can forget about because it's so dumb and overrated. I mean, why can't people get over it already, right? S tier. Because it's my list, okay? And I can do what I want with it. I love everything about this game. Everything. And I know there are already people hitting up the comment section saying I just ruined the whole list and I'm too clouded by my nostalgia, and you know what? They're probably right. I'm not too prideful to admit that there is probably quite a bit of nostalgia that goes into my placement of Ocarina of Time on this tier list. But hear me out. As far as legacy is concerned, you have to admit, Ocarina of Time was to 3D adventure games as Super Mario Bros. Was to platforming games. It was groundbreaking. It invented Z-targeting. It gave us the Song of Storms and Gerudo Valley. Most Ocarina of Time critics these days call its gameplay old and outdated and not very fun to play, and they have a point. That is true. But I will say this. I hopped on and tried it out the other day when the Nintendo 64 emulator went live on the Switch Online Service Expansion Pack thing, and it felt kind of laggy, just like it did back in the old Nintendo 64 days, which of course is a little concerning for an emulator, but guess what? I still kicked ass. I just kind of zoned back into how I used to play it back on the original console that's sitting right there on my table. I think the issue is, if we're big enough to admit it, not that the gameplay itself is just too difficult to get into, but that modern gamers just don't really want to take the time to get good at it. But like I said, everyone's opinion is valid, and nobody has to try something that they don't want to. Anyway, the final game on this list, as you already know, is Breath of the Wild. A game that once again shattered expectations and blew up in popularity as a result. I mean, it's not even a competition. Ocarina of Time, with its several releases, comes in just shy of 14 million units sold, while Breath of the Wild surpasses 26 with just 2 versions. And it deserves it. It's got plenty of puzzles, plenty of unique gadgets, and probably way too much free space to explore. But it's not the perfect Zelda game, in my opinion. See, I have this ancient video out on my channel that you totally don't have to check out, but you totally can if you want to, where I talk about my feelings regarding Breath of the Wild right after I played it, some nearly 5 years ago. And the TLDR was that I was somewhat disappointed. It was mostly because of the style of storytelling though, and to be honest, in recent years now that I've played it several times over, I've developed much more appreciation for its story. But for those who go into it expecting the same feeling that they got from previous Zelda games that might have been their favorite, they might end up being a bit disappointed after you get past all the fancy open world and sandbox physics, which are hardly unique to Zelda. I won't take the time to full-on review it in this little section on this video, but I will summarize my thoughts with this simple sentence. Breath of the Wild is a phenomenal open world game and an okay Zelda game. Triple S tier. And there you have it, my official Masked Nintendo Bandit Zelda tier list that I made as a final celebration of Zelda 35. You'll notice that I didn't include a few games from the series, and that's because those are the games that I haven't played at all and therefore have no personal opinion on. So I will leave these games up to you, my viewers, who might have played them. Let me know in the comments below where you would put these games on my list. I look forward to reading your comments after I go live with the video. Also, thank you so much for watching this video and all the other ones that I made in 2021. This year just flew by, I think, for everyone, especially after the craziness that was last year. And I'm so grateful to every one of you for being here and, again, growing the channel farther than I ever thought possible. I still have just like 10,000 subscribers in my head. Like, I still cannot fully comprehend just how big Masked Nintendo Bandit is at this point, but I hope each and every one of you knows exactly how much you mean to me, and I hope that I can continue to entertain you in 2022 onward, which hopefully is going to be the year where Breath of the Wild 2 releases to the public finally. Fingers crossed. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one, and that's all I've got for this year. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe so that I see you next year. This is Masked Nintendo Bandit, looking forward to the future with you, and signing out on 2021. Peace.